Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for Telesur. I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. To begin today, we go to Colombia. That's where Colombia's Attorney General has announced he will be challenging a decision to grant adoption rights to same-sex couples. Now on Wednesday, the Constitutional Court in Bogota voted 4-1 to allow gay people to adopt children. However, the Attorney General, Alejandro Ordóñez, rejected the ruling and is planning to challenge it. Ordóñez said that children need a father and a mother to develop correctly. His remarks have been widely criticized. Meanwhile, the Colombian government and the FARC guerrillas are discussing long-term solutions to ensure that any peace agreement will be permanent. Representatives of the rebel group at the peace talks in Cuba are proposing a fund which will help provide solutions for social issues that have fueled the conflict and that continue to affect Colombia. As the FARC spokesperson explained, the fund will help implement the National Peace Plan.
The fund will be created with the constitutional framework, and it will have a 10-year duration. The amount of the resources allocated to the fund will be defined as a portion of Colombia's GDP through a legal framework that would be created with special account with the national budget in order to finance projects and goals defined through the National Peace Plan.
And the FARC spokesperson also explained how the size of this fund would be decided.
To define the annual amount of the fund, an estimate will be made of the economic impact of peace, both its costs and benefits. In particular, account will be taken of the investment needs for the project included in the National Peace Building Plan. If any event, the total amount should not be less than 4% of the country's GDP, and this amount will not be subject to fiscal adjustments or cuts.
Different indigenous groups have been protesting outside the Brazilian Congress against a proposed constitutional amendment that would change the way their ancestral lands are demarcated. Now, the protesters went to Congress to demand that the speakers of the Senate and the lower house take into account their interest and the impact of any change on their communities. The new measure would give Congress the power to approve the boundaries of indigenous reserves in place of the Indigenous Foundation, FUNAI. Last week, a committee of the lower house approved the amendment which would remove the protection given to indigenous lands. Now, the original protection was introduced after the end of the military dictatorship in 1988 in the Constitution. Indigenous people and their supporters say the change, known as PEC 215, will give even more power to cattle ranchers, big soy farmers, and other agribusiness to block the demarcation of their ancestral lands. Landowning interests are a powerful lobby in the Brazilian Congress. Cuban President Raul Castro will visit Mexico Friday to discuss bilateral relations. The head of the Cuban state will meet with his counterpart, Enrique Peña Nieto, to improve diplomatic ties. Now, for the past 18 years, relations between both countries have been tense and distant. The leaders will discuss regional issues and Mexican investment in the island. Still in Mexico, a new court ruling regarding the recreational use of marijuana has sparked mixed reactions there. For more, we go to our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
The historic Supreme Court ruling to decriminalize for one specific civil organization the recreational cultivation and consumption of marijuana is being considered a watershed moment for pro-legalization groups that say prohibition has taken a bloody toll in Mexico.
I believe that after 150 dead, more than 26,000 disappeared, and more than 250,000 displaced, we are more than ready. We need to end this corruption, and the clandestine market strengthens corruption.
Yet, these same groups applauding the decision warn that strong private and state interests will seek to make full legalization difficult. They point to a multi-billion-dollar industry that they argue benefits from keeping more than 14,500 people behind bars due to the prohibition laws.
There is a strong control of this prohibition because it benefits certain people. On the one hand, it benefits criminal groups, but on the other, security and justice institutions.
Meanwhile, there are opponents to the Supreme Court ruling and its implications. For some, the recreational use of marijuana presents a danger to society and health. They argue that strong family values are key in maintaining social peace.
There wouldn't be so much violence if people were more integrated with their families.
Yet pro-legalization activists point to the systemic violence that prohibition provokes. They say opponents are misguided by social stigmas and that there are at least 5.7 million users of cannabis that consume responsibly.
There are many stigmas around the people who use these substances, and there is a notion that all the cases are negative or will result in problems. When that is the truth, out of the segment of society that consumes cannabis, the problematic cases represent a very small percentage.
Mexico continues to maintain some of the most conservative drug prohibition policies in the Americas, while a growing choir of the region's leaders are calling for change. Supporters of legalization point to the growing trend in the world that 30 countries, including the United States, are now regulating the recreational, scientific, medicinal, and industrial use of cannabis. Clayton Can, Telesur, Mexico City.
Lawmakers in Bolivia continue discussing a legal framework for an upcoming referendum which will allow President Evo Morales to run for re-election. For an update now, we're going to turn to our correspondent, Dimitri O'Donnell. Dimitri, is the discussion moving forward there, and what are the different arguments on both sides?
Yes, that's right. For the government, certainly the discussion is moving forward because they got the draft law passed by 113 votes in favour as opposed to 43 votes against. This was really no surprise given the fact that Evo Morales supporters control 2/3 of Parliament. What they've said now is that this shows democracy in action. It's an historic day for Bolivia, and of course it paves the way for President Evo Morales and the Vice President to run again, possibly in 2019, pending the result of that referendum, which will be held on February 21st in 2016.
And what have been some of the main disagreements? What are some of the main arguments against this proposal, Dimitri?
There's been a lot of dispute in Parliament. It was quite a touchy debate that lasted for 17 hours. And when the result was announced, there was a lot of jeering, booing and heckling from the opposition. What they are mainly opposed to is the registration process. In the past, in order to campaign in any election, you had to register with the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. That is no longer the case here in Bolivia for this referendum that's taking place next year. The opposition say this is unfair and that anyone can go out on the streets and campaign in an unregulated fashion. They're also alleging corruption, and they say that the whole law that was drafted yesterday and the fact that the referendum is taking place at all is anti-democratic and unconstitutional in regards to the Constitution of Bolivia. And they're also giving out about the allocation of time on radio and television, which has been set at 10 minutes, and for 2 pages in the written media. They say that this is unfair to their side because, of course, the opposition or the government supporters, the social movement, are very well resourced, and the opposition are not.
All right, Dimitri O'Donnell reporting there from La Paz. Dimitri, thanks.
Thank you.
We turn to Central America now. Honduran women are launching an international campaign to stop the Honduran government from banning birth control pills. Our correspondent Gerardo Torres now reports.
Honduran women's rights organizations will now demand the state before international tribunals after they have received no positive answer by national tribunals on their claim to suspend the prohibition of the emergency morning after pill that was approved by the National Congress in 2009.
I believe that we have strong arguments. The resolutions of the National Court damage the women's human rights, and I believe that it is enough proof to present it in an international tribunal such as the Inter-American Court of Commission, which have already ruled in favor of women's human rights. We believe that with the strength of our arguments, and with reason, and law on our side, we can make the Inter-American Court pressure the government to stop the prohibition of emergency birth control methods for women.
Honduras is the only country in the continent to prohibit this birth control pill that must be taken within 72 hours after having sexual relations. The pills were banned under the argument that they cause abortion, an argument that has been proven false by national and international health specialists.
Within the universal right to health, we have sexual and reproductive rights, which are very important. Among these, there is the right that every woman has to choose her planning method. This means that she can decide when she wants to procreate, when she wants to do it, or how many children she wants to have. The birth control method should be part of the offer that public health has for the female population.
The international claim for the respect of women's sexual rights could take several years. Meanwhile, Honduras is the second country in America with the highest pregnancy rate on minors, and in general, women have 2 or 3 more children than they wish. Sexual education is still the big missing element in public education. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
What really caused the downing of the Russian plane that killed over 200 people in Egypt? That's a big question. Did someone manage to get a bomb on that plane? We're going to look into some of the different information emerging when we come back.
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today. With Bill Fletcher. The Global African. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis, and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand, and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Awaited details of the highly criticized landmark U.S.-backed Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal have finally been revealed. Now, the TPP aims to free up commerce between 12 countries that account for 40% of the world's economy and to counter China's rising economic power. Just some of the details revealed in the text include Japan's pledge to ease trade barriers on imported French fries and butter, while for the first time in a trade agreement, Malaysia will eliminate tariffs on all imported alcohol. Days after Russian authorities dismissed claims that ISIS brought down Metrojet Flight 9268, Britain's foreign minister says his government believes that an explosive device may have caused the incident.
Well, as I've said already, we think there is a significant possibility that there was an explosive device on the plane. If that is the case, who put it there and what the motive was will be a subject of an investigation. It's not the important issue for the moment. The important issue is the safety and security of British passengers and British aircraft, and that's what we're focused on.
Meanwhile, both Russia and Egypt have urged caution over suggestions that the Russian airliner that crashed in Sinai may have been bombed. Russia said such suggestions were speculation, while Egypt said there was no evidence yet to support that claim. Due to the refugee crisis, up to 3 million asylum seekers are set to arrive in Europe by 2017. According to the European Commission, the refugees will have a small but positive impact on the EU's economy. This positive spin comes after a wedge between countries in the bloc due to the large numbers of refugees and migrants coming in from Syria and other war-torn countries.
There will be an impact of growth that is weak but positive for the EU as a whole, and that will increase the GDP by 0.2 to 0.3% by 2017.
On Wednesday, Spanish anti-NATO protesters staged a rally to protest against NATO's Trident Juncture military drills, which are being conducted in the Mediterranean Sea. Over 36,000 and a large number of aircraft, vessels, and submarines from the 30 NATO members and partner countries of the bloc are involved in what is the largest NATO exercise in over a decade. Protesters say this is a waste of public resources, while Spain has implemented substantial cuts in welfare spending in the recent years. One of Italy's biggest organized crime trials in years, dubbed Mafia Capital, has opened in Rome, where counselors and gangsters allegedly stole millions of dollars of public cash. Massimo Carminati is accused of having run the criminal network and will be questioned via a prison video link. According to prosecutors, mobsters flourished under Rome's former right-wing mayor, Gianni Alemanno. The 12th Asia-Europe Foreign Ministers meeting has begun in Luxembourg. Now, the representatives from 21 European and Asian countries will discuss climate change, sustainable development, and the management of natural disasters. The group will review international sustainable development goals and will prepare a common document to be presented at the upcoming United Nations Climate Change Conference in Paris. Speaking of climate change now, in India, residents of New Delhi are dealing with rising air pollution rates there. Air pollution levels in the capital have soared, as we're seeing there. According to experts, current conditions could worsen as the temperature drops further. A study by the World Health Organization in 2014 concluded that Delhi had the worst air quality out of the 1,600 cities they surveyed worldwide. Taiwan's president has been accused of selling out the island as he prepares for a historic meeting with China's president, the first of its kind since 1949. The Taiwanese leader explained that both countries should aim at normalizing ties.
The meeting is not for the next election, it's for the welfare of the next generation. We hope the Mashi Summit will lead to first step towards normalizing ties. No matter who becomes Taiwanese president in the future, he or she can continue to push forward cross-strait relations.
According to an insurgent commander, a splinter faction of the Afghan Taliban has selected its own leader to challenge the new chief of the militant group, Mullah Akhtar Mohammed Mansour. Several high-ranking commanders of the group's Islamic Emirate faction questioned Mansour's leadership and refused to accept him as their leader. This has raised fresh doubts about chances of breathing life into stalled peace talks. Egypt's top court has postponed the final trial of the country's former president, Hosni Mubarak, over the killing of protesters during the 2011 uprising that ended his 30-year rule. Mubarak's second and final retrial has been adjourned until January 21st. A court has ordered that it be moved from the High Court building in the center of Cairo to a more suitable location. Mubarak was originally sentenced to life in prison in 2012 for conspiring to murder over 200 demonstrators, among other charges, during the 18-day revolt. The Nigerian president has warned his incoming cabinet ministers that there would be no immunity for misconduct in office. It's a bid to fight corrupt practices which have damaged the country.
The objective of this retreat is clearly reflected in the choice of topics which we will be dealing with during the sessions. The need for observing the rule of law is being emphasized to ensure that impunity is removed from government conduct. You are coming on board the ship of governance at an interesting time. So much has been said about the state of our economy. It is expected that we make the running of government at all levels as lean as possible.
Bridge forward and Real Madrid star Karim Benzema is entangled in a controversial scandal. Now, Benzema was detained Wednesday for interrogation after evidence emerged linking him to a blackmail scandal against his fellow teammate, Mathieu Valbuena. The teammate allegedly paid 150,000 euros to prevent a sex video from being released to the public. Taking a look at culture now, we turn to Telesur's own Cultura Latina, and that takes on a look at how the Day of the Dead is celebrated across Latin America. Here's a sneak peek of this week's episode.
This week in Cultura Latina, we're celebrating the Day of the Dead traditions in Latin America. Among the countries we're visiting, we're going to the south of the Mexican capital, where indigenous communities continue to carry out the deeply rooted traditions of the Day of the Dead. In one of the neighbors of the infamous Xochimilco area, residents express their homage and memory to the deceased loved ones, while at the same time sharing a kind of festive atmosphere with their family and friends, all in the cemetery. All of this and more this week in Cultura Latina.
It's a fascinating holiday, Day of the Dead, there in Mexico and across other places in Latin America. That's what we're covering on this Thursday afternoon here from Caracas, with plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great afternoon.